All right, we're moving right into it. Definitely a change of pace from talking about some delicious smoothie blends, but we're going to bring in Farrah from Rewind. Farrah, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. I'm excited to talk about this session because it is one of those things that you're just it's naturally like, oh my God, my whole business is totally at risk. No one has thought about this at all until you show it to them, and then they, are scrambling to make sure that their company isn't at risk of going under. I think, in some ways, I think about it as a way to ensure, like real insurance product, ensure your business doesn't go under, but I think there's a lot more that goes into that. And as we as a company grow and now are raising capital and building technology product, we have to re-engineer our own data security initiatives. And I think everyone has to go through different stages. More money you make, the more at risk you are of getting hacked. Email lists are more vital than ever. Former employees could come after you. Bad developer code, and I'm sure you've got a whole list of things that you're about to show us of what goes wrong. So I'll add your presentation to the screen, and I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks for that introduction. So hi everyone, and welcome to Protect Your Online Store, Protect Your Business. My name is Farrah, and I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at Rewind. So in this session, I'll be talking about a topic, like Derek mentioned, that's often overlooked until it's too late. And that's data protection. I'll be talking about the data loss risks facing e-commerce stores and sharing useful tips that you can implement right away to protect your store. So before we get started, I'll give a little introduction to myself and how I came to join Rewind. So like Rewind, I'm based in Canada. I've been working in marketing for over 11 years, primarily within cybersecurity and SaaS, but my background also includes recent experience on the merchant side in the fashion and furniture industries. As a fun fact, prior to joining Rewind, I was actually a Rewind Backups for Shopify customer. Like having worked in cybersecurity for many years, naturally, when I started creating my first Shopify store, I wanted to make sure that I had a backup solution in place. And that's how I discovered Rewind on the Shopify App Store. I became a big fan of the app, and I guess that wasn't enough for me, so I joined the Rewind team. So here's just a quick agenda of what I'll cover today. I'll start out with a quick introduction to Rewind, and then I'll cover why there is no undo button in Shopify and BigCommerce, as well as many other SaaS platforms. Next, I'll talk about what can go wrong, the common ways that data loss can occur for e-commerce stores, and what's at stake. And finally, I'll share 6 easy tips for how you can protect your store. So before we dive in, I just want to provide some background about Rewind's experience in the area of data protection. Rewind works with global brands around the world to power their backups and make sure their data is secure. We've been on this mission since 2015 to help businesses protect their cloud data. And today, over 80,000 customers in more than 100 countries use Rewind's apps and support to ensure their SaaS applications run uninterrupted. So Rewind makes it easy to back up, restore, and copy the critical information stored in a growing list of SaaS applications, including Shopify, BigCommerce, also QuickBooks Online, GitHub, and Trello. And that's why we have over 1,300 5-star reviews across platforms. So with respect to with respect to e-commerce specifically, we are a Shopify Plus certified app, the #1 top reviewed BigCommerce app, and the BigCommerce 2020 Merchant Choice Award winner. So with all of that being said, like simply put, data protection is our world. So I'll start with why is there no undo button? So selling online, as you all know, is entirely dependent on whether your store is up and running and available to accept orders. Anytime your site is down or not working properly, you are losing customers and revenue. Many of you are probably using platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce, which have infrastructure in place to make sure your store is up and running. But at the same time, there are still ways that your store can experience downtime as a result of actions, and let's face it, mistakes made by you, your team, or contractors while editing your store. So why is there no undo button in these kind of platforms for this type of mistake? The reason is that Shopify and BigCommerce, like many SaaS platforms, use the shared responsibility model for data security in the cloud. This model shows that the e-commerce platform is responsible for platform-level data, while the merchant is responsible for their account-level data. This means that you are responsible for securing the data in your individual store, which includes everything from store themes to product images and descriptions. This is the data that you rely on to populate your store, display your products, and generally provide an excellent shopping experience to your customers. And this data is your responsibility to back up and protect. There's a common misconception about what SaaS platforms in general provide when it comes to backups. Taking Shopify and BigCommerce as examples, they perform platform-level backups to protect all of the stores on their platform from natural disasters, data breaches, and other threats. So in this unlikely event that something extreme occurred and their whole system failed, like for example, if a meteorite were to strike their data center, or they had a mass data breach, Shopify or BigCommerce would be able to restore the data of everyone on their platform. However, if something happened to your store in particular, that backup is not useful to you. You don't have access to it. That's because these platforms back up all of their merchants' data in bulk, so they have no way of determining whose data is whose. So if a third-party app causes a problem, or a CSV import goes wrong, or if someone accidentally or maliciously deletes products from your store, you can't call Shopify or BigCommerce and have them recover your lost data, even for a fee. So this all comes as a surprise to most people, not just for e-commerce merchants, but really across SaaS in general. So I touched briefly on some of the most common risks that e-commerce stores face, but now I'll do a deeper dive into what can really go wrong. So we'll start with human errors, as they are the single biggest cause for data loss. In fact, a study commissioned by the UK's Information Commissioner's Office recently found that human error was the cause of 90% of data breaches. So no matter how much experience you have, how much training you do, or how many times you've done the same thing, mistakes are bound to happen, and it can sometimes be catastrophic. You might be trying to delete a blog category and end up accidentally deleting all the blog posts in that category. Mistakes with CSV imports and theme code edits are some of the human errors we hear about the most. So I'll share a quick case study for each. So CSV imports can be helpful when making bulk edits to a store, but they can actually do more harm than good if even one column isn't accurate. Before they became a Rewind customer, Whisker Seeker, the largest manufacturer of catfishing equipment in the US, learned this the hard way. They added a bulk import of changes that resulted in accidentally wiping their entire product catalog, which contained over 300 SKUs. Every product, every SKU, and every photo was permanently deleted. The worst part was this happened just 3 days before Black Friday. They faced $120,000 US in potential losses if their site was not restored. Their founder, Matt Davis, told us that he thought he was literally going to have a heart attack. So theme code edits. The easiest way to break a website is by making a small mistake in its code. If you're making any customizations or edits to your theme code, you need to have an easy way to reverse changes that didn't work out the way you expected. Unless you have a backup, reversing changes might mean spending hours redoing work or even hiring someone to help you clean up the mess. Before becoming a Rewind customer, the fitness brand Crossrope made an update to their theme code that broke the ability for customers to add products to their cart. This, of course, brought sales to a halt. They had to turn to their last manual theme backup, which was over a month old. Restoring this backup caused its own set of problems, as any theme updates they had made over the last month were all lost. So after a full 24 hours of work, they were back up and running, but those lost sales could never be restored. So now let's talk about third-party app errors. You've probably installed a number of apps through the Shopify or BigCommerce app stores. In fact, there's a stat that Shopify merchants have an average of 6 apps installed. Apps are wonderful. They add functionality to your store, but when they don't work properly or they have bugs, they can cause serious problems. If you look closely, the majority of third-party apps require read and write permissions, meaning they can also change, manipulate, or delete your data. Not all apps are created equal, and some are created by very small teams, and their QA processes can be really quite minimal, which makes bugs more likely. Revival Rugs learned this lesson at possibly the worst time, right before their big launch. After a third-party app accidentally set all of their inventory to 0, their staff had to scramble to manually fix the inventory on their 500 products. They were up until like 2 or 3 in the morning for at least 3 nights in a row, just fixing this mess. Another thing is, although it's not something that any of us like to think about, an intentional data deletion by an employee, ex-employee, or contractor is a real risk. Employees often have access to your online store and thus the ability to delete important files if they feel motivated to do so. One of our customers lost over 3,000 products and over a year's worth of work when a developer maliciously deleted the data from his store. The only thing that saved him was his backups. Hackers and malware are another serious risk. Cybercrime, including malware like ransomware, is now a $45 billion industry, and it's increasingly threatening e-commerce businesses. While historically, cybercriminals have targeted large organizations, that has all changed. A 2020 Verizon study found that almost a third of cybercrime victims were SMBs. And while Shopify and BigCommerce take extensive precautions to protect their servers against any malicious attacks, hackers target individual accounts, and they get increasingly creative with their methods. One of the ways they do this is by sending phishing emails to try to trick you and your team into giving them access to your store. So next I'll cover what's at stake. Whatever the cause of the data loss, the costs for e-commerce stores are the same. So firstly, time spent manually recovering lost data. So as you all know, building an online experience is a significant investment of money, time, and effort. And if something went wrong, rebuilding it would be a daunting task. Like, for example, products can be accidentally deleted in an instant. It's a really common mistake. But just imagine the frustration and time required to manually rebuild all of your product pages from scratch. It happens. Next is lost revenue from downtime. So when the data powering your store is unavailable, business as usual just comes crashing to a halt. Data loss often results in downtime, hindering a store's ability to sell products as usual, which can mean thousands in lost sales. Downtime costs money, so the faster you can recover from crashes or mistakes, the less money you lose. Lastly, lost customers and credibility. So if you could think about it this way, each new website visitor is a potential repeat customer. If your store isn't functioning properly, visitors have a negative impression of your brand, resulting in a poor customer experience, loss of trust, and a bad impression. So now we'll get into the 6 tips. So how can you protect your store? The number one thing you can do to mitigate these risks is to ensure that you always have an up-to-date backup of your store. A lot of us don't think of backups as a security feature, but it really is. It gives you the freedom to update your products experiment with new messaging or images, and work with your team without the fear of mistakes. So it's important to look for two things in a backup. They should be automatically triggered and they should be consistent. A good rule of thumb is to use daily backups. But realistically, manual backups just don't work in today's world. Technology has enabled us to move so quickly, and that means that you will inevitably fall behind, whether it's because you simply forget to export your CSV file for the day, or you run out of storage. It's just simply not manageable. Not to mention a big headache and all the time it would take to dig through all those old CSV files. As an automatic backup and restore solution, Rewind becomes that magic undo button that is missing from platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce. With Rewind, you can trust that the critical data that drives your business is securely backed up and available for you to recover if something goes wrong. So if an employee accidentally deletes photos, imports a bad CSV file, or tries out a new app that has unexpected consequences, with Rewind, you can restore that information in minutes. And as we all know, time is money, especially when you consider the costs associated with downtime. The key benefit of Rewind is not just that it automatically backs up your data, but that you can easily restore a single item, such as a photo, a group of items, such as a product category, or your entire store. It's your choice. It removes the need for manual backups so you can focus on what you do best. And if you're ever subjected to an audit, all of the data that proves compliance is at your fingertips. My next tip is use a password manager. So we all know that like password 123 and your birthday or your pet's name are not secure passwords. You probably also know that you shouldn't reuse passwords. We see cybersecurity breaches in the news all the time where passwords are stolen. So if you reuse passwords, a hacker can take your password that was stolen from some other site and use it to gain access to your online store. But coming up with and remembering strong, secure, randomized passwords is nearly impossible unless you're a robot. And that's why we recommend using a password manager, which, if you're not familiar with them, it's a simple app that generates and stores strong, secure passwords for you. Using a password manager makes it possible to use different strong passwords for all of your online services, but you only have to remember a single master password. After you've entered your master password, the app will automatically generate, store, and fill in passwords for websites that you've previously authorized. Some examples of password managers are 1Password or LastPass. At Rewind, we're such a fan of 1Password that it's actually mandatory for all employees. Embrace multi-factor authentication. So you may have heard of two-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is like its more secure cousin. By enabling MFA on your store, it creates a two-part system. Your password is something you know, while your MFA authentication code is something you have. The combination of the two keeps your data secure. So what's the issue with just using your phone to get your authentication code texted to you? The trouble with that is an authentication process is only as secure as its weakest link. And SMS text messages are honestly pretty weak. So MFA typically uses an authenticator app, which can also be conveniently found on your phone. An authenticator app, like Google, Apple, and Microsoft, they all have versions available. It'll generate a unique code that is only valid for a certain amount of time. This code is then used to authenticate your identity before you're granted access to your store. With this method, the only way to break into your account is to crack your password, find you, steal your phone, break into your phone, and then get the code from your app. And Not even hackers have time for that. So adopt the principle of least privilege. As a company expands its online footprint, it's common for multiple people in the organization to have access to your store. Unfortunately, every new login creates a new avenue for data loss. Life happens, people make mistakes, people quit, contractors are brought on and phased out, and more often than not, malicious attacks come from unhappy employees or former employees that are looking to get back at the business for one reason or another. And that's why you need to regularly audit staff and collaborator permissions on your store. Encourage your team to adopt least privilege practices across all the software and apps you use. The principle of least privilege means that only people who really need the tools to do the job should have access to them. Control access for third-party apps. It is vital to understand how much access third-party apps have to your data. If an app is requesting read and write permissions, that means it could potentially manipulate, corrupt, or even delete your data. Any app asking for this level of access needs to be carefully vetted. Here's some tips for what to look for. So we recommend carefully reading the terms and conditions of the app to see the detailed information about what data the app will have access to. Check out reports from industry analysts like Gartner and Forrester, along with reviews from software evaluation portals like GetApp, G2 Crowd, and Capterra. These can often be helpful when evaluating a vendor's reputation and trustworthiness. Thirdly, don't forget to check the Shopify App Store reviews, especially read those one-star reviews and find out, why were people dissatisfied and how is their setup similar to yours? Another key factor is to consider the availability of customer support, documentation, FAQs, and other helpful troubleshooting materials. Does the app developer have a customer support number or an inbox where they can be contacted? Another question to consider is if the app is supported by a team of developers or a well-established SaaS company, or is it just built and maintained by a few people? If you're planning to use this app in the long term, you'll want to make sure that the company is going to be committed to releasing updates for new operating systems, new features, and bug patches. So another one is watch out for phishing attacks. I touched on this a bit earlier. So you want to make sure you educate yourself and your team on how to avoid phishing scams. Everyone that has access to your store is a potential avenue for hackers to gain access to your data. And that's why data security is a team sport. So here's what to look out for. Verify suspicious emails and texts with the sender by sending a new email or picking up the phone and giving them a call. Ignore and delete unsolicited emails or texts from people outside of your organization. Do not open or click suspicious documents or links in an email or text. Always verify with the sender in a different channel before taking action. Unsolicited instructions via email should make you incredibly cautious, if not downright suspicious. So if you are unsure, best to leave it. So to recap, e-commerce stores face many risks that you can't always prevent, from human errors to cyber attacks, but you can prepare. These 6 tips for preventing data loss don't take long to implement, and if the worst were to happen, they could save you days of recovery time. Understanding the limitations of the platform-level backups provided by SaaS platforms, when you look at what can go wrong, I really can't stress enough how important it is to have an up-to-date backup and to be able to restore it quickly. If the worst were to happen, you can rest easy knowing that the data you rely on is safely backed up and you will avoid that costly downtime. So if you would like to try Rewind Backups, we offer a 7-day free trial and it's available on the Shopify and BigCommerce app stores. So I just want to thank everyone for joining this session. I hope you came away with some useful tips that you can start implementing and protect your online stores.
Farrah, I almost had a heart attack as you go through this presentation with just like the idea of like my store disappearing like right before Black Friday. That scares me. I think fear is a healthy motivator here for you to go install Rewind today and make sure that you never have to face those risks. And I know you kind of mentioned it before, but like there's two ways that this can go. Either something bad happens on your site and you have Rewind there to back you up, or something bad happens on your site and you realize you should have had Rewind installed before it went wrong. Those are the only two things that happen. There's really no other tool in the space that can do all of the things that Rewind can. Because in all honesty, if there was a close competitor, I would mention, I would say, well, Rewind or somebody else. The truth is Rewind owns the market today, and for good reason, because you have a great product. And so highly recommend everyone check out Rewind. Make sure that you never lose your data and mitigate all those risks as quickly as possible. So, yeah, with that, Farrah, I'll let you go. We're going to move right into our next session with Edward. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Derek.